White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders' greatest hits, back when she actually used to give daily press briefings. Remember that? And for the record, it's now been more than 3 months since the last one. Trump announced Sanders' departure on Thursday, officially marking an end to the tumultuous tenure of a press secretary who pretty much upended all traditional norms of the role by ending press briefings as we know it, revoking press credentials, and according to the Mueller report, by just flat out lying. Joining me now is Tiffany Cross of the Beat DC, Tara Dowdell, president of the Tara Dowdell Group. They've never met before, by the way. MSNBC media analyst Eric Deggans and former Obama advisor Lori Watkins. Tara, since you are the newest member here and you're sitting at the table, let me start with you because the New York Times it has this quote here, where it says, others have argued that Mr. Trump has never liked the daily briefing as a forum to disseminate the message of the day, preferring to do it himself on Twitter. And I bring that up because, as I said in the intro, there hasn't been a press briefing in more than 3 months. With her departure, do you think we have now witnessed the end of having a formal White House press secretary?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Trump wants to speak directly to people. He knows that he can use his Twitter account to do so. And one of the things that made Sarah Huckabee Sanders last so long is that Trump was looking for someone like Trump to be in that press, when there were in fact press briefings, when there were in fact interviews. He was looking for someone to be combative. He was looking for someone who was going to lie shamelessly. He was looking for someone who was going to lie emphatically. And then if you notice, what she does is she doubles down on the lie once she's called out on the lie. And so what they want to do, it's strategy. And I think people need to kind of keep this front and center. What they want to do is they want to create so much confusion amongst the American public that people can't quite figure out what's true and what's not true. And I have to say, in large part, they have been successful.
Well, Eric, let me bring you into this conversation because as Tara was speaking, every time I heard Sarah Huckabee Sanders speak anywhere, not necessarily from the podium, but anywhere, and actually any member of this administration, I no longer feel that they're talking to me as a citizen of the United States. I feel like they're specifically talking to just one person, an audience of one, and that's the President of the United States. Do you have that impression? Is that something that is even sustainable if there is another White House press secretary?
Well, it's certainly the longest-lasting members of the president's cabinet and inner circle have been those who have always kept his interests first and spoken to him first when they speak publicly. One of the things that this president has done is that he's governing by speaking to his base almost exclusively, and inviting the rest of us to just go along for the ride. So in a way, Sarah Huckabee Sanders echoed that perfectly. She spoke to him directly and through him echoed the interests of his base. She has been one of the more effective members of his inner circle, and I think that's why she's lasted so long. One of the questions I have is can anyone replace her? Can anyone do what she's done? Because in effect, she put his interests above her own interests. I mean, her credibility is pretty low at this point. And I wonder what sort of options she has available to her outside of conservative media, given how many misstatements, mistruths, lies she's told on behalf of this president.
Well, Eric, since you brought it up, who can replace her? Well, there are names that are out there. Take a look at these names. There's Stephanie Grisham, Communications Director for the First Lady, Hogan Gidley, who's the Deputy White House Press Secretary, Steve Cortez, who is a political commentator. Tiffany?
Yeah. So I think Stephanie Grisham's probably top person in that slot. I mean, she's another fierce defender of the birther, the First Lady, Melania Trump, and she, steps out there all the time. She's a fierce advocate for the First Lady, and I think, this is a president who values loyalty. But I just want to say, Sarah Sanders changed the mood in the James Brady press room. I remember back a long time ago, when I used to book Jonathan when I was running the BET News department, and the people in that room during the Obama administration and every other administration administration, these were hardcore journalists. You know, they were there to get a story. During the Trump administration, the people in that room, they were sycophants. They were basement bloggers. They were not trained journalists. And they would actually be incidents where people would stand up and start to berate the other actual journalists in there. I remember Kristen from here at NBC. Kristen had to ask somebody, are you
Kristen Welker.
Kristen Welker. Sorry, Kristen, I love you. But she would have to ask, like, are you a journalist? Like, who are you? Why are you in this room? And do you remember when Sarah Sanders lied and said that Jim Acosta assaulted the intern
Oh, right.
who was aggressively trying to snatch his microphone? These were dangerous things that were happening. And so I think when you look at somebody who's going to come in that line of work next, Donald Trump wants that kind of person. Hogan, I would say, is definitely a top contender. Steve Cortez is a nut. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen him on television, but he literally invents things. I think Stephanie Grisham's in the top slot. Hogan would be if he were a woman, but I think he's going to want to replace this position with another woman. So I would call it for Stephanie Grisham.
My colleague at the Washington Post, who's the public editor at the Washington Post, Margaret Sullivan, has a column out where she basically calls out Sarah Sanders, where she writes, she would claim to represent the truth on behalf of a president who lies. She did it disrespectfully and apparently without shame or an understanding of what the role of White House press secretary should be. She misled reporters to, and through them, misled the American people. And Lori, in the end, that is what the press secretary's job is. Even though the press secretary is appointed by the President of the United States to be his spokesperson to the American people, she didn't do that. She didn't have the interests of the American people or freedom of the press at heart.
No, she never did. It was apparent every day that she either did speak or there was any reference to Sarah Sanders. What I'm constantly reminded of, what's going on with our lack of freedom of the press with this administration is it's just comparative to what goes on under the authoritarian rule, what's going on in Turkey. Freedom of the press is non-existent. I feel that that's what's happening on a daily basis. The role itself has been eliminated. If a person is, maybe it's Stephanie, the president taps to come into this new role, I really believe that it's going to be in name only. The president does speak for himself. He has his own microphone, his own platform. He has news networks that help him do that. So having a person there that's able to play defense on a daily basis, that is going to be number one for the president, someone that is absolutely loyal, trustworthy to him, and puts him before themselves, which is exactly what Sarah Sanders did.
Eric, let me